This is Marketing Mondays number 86, the first one of December. We're closing in on the end of the year. I hope everybody is staying warm out there, and hopefully business is still doing pretty well. I know this is kind of the slow season for a lot of our tint folks, so hopefully you're still managing and doing some different jobs to kind of keep everything kind of rolling. So, but we're glad to have you guys here.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. It is a great, I love this time of the year. One, I love the holidays. And then two, I love the fact that it's a time of the year where you can kind of reflect on what the last year has been and what you want to accomplish in the new year, not just on New Year's Eve when you're doing your resolution, but it's a time of the year where I really try to take the whole month of December and really look back at the previous 11 months and see what has worked, what hasn't, what I might want to change, and really start putting the wheels in motion so that 2024 can maybe look a lot more like what I'd like it to. And that's not a one-day thing, that's a multiple. But it's an exciting time of the year, not only for the holidays, it's just a great time of the year to think about what the last year has been and what you want the next year to be.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. It's funny you mentioned like New Year's resolutions. To me, we mentioned it last week. Like you could start something, but it's how are you going to be consistent? And to me, it's one of those, I want to start things now if I want to kind of move into the new year and make sure that I'm keep doing it versus just kind of having some set calendar date. Like if I really want to commit to something, what's stopping me from doing it right now? So I think that's a key point. And that kind of goes in with a lot of the questions I kind of gathered up today was if you are kind of thinking about doing marketing, whether it's on your own or trying to have somebody do it, like what kind of questions are you thinking about? Because like you said, right now is kind of the time of the year to either figure out what's working, what isn't. Like you're going to start new plans. I know we have people with co-op money. And so there's a lot of different things to think about here at the end of the year that's going to kind of drive your success for next year. So
absolutely.
I just think that it's just
I
something that we need to all think about.
I could tell you right now, Ronnie is involved right now with this like ice submersion type thing that he's doing a plunge every morning. And I can tell you, I don't know, I don't have defined exactly what I want to accomplish in 2024, but doing immersion in ice water every morning is not part of it. I'm just going to go on record right now and say I've taken that off the list.
That's okay. I'm a little weird and crazy and kind of think outside the box. And so everybody has their each little niche of what they want to do and how do you want to do about things in your life. So yeah, it's definitely helped me. It's not something, but obviously it's not going to help everybody or it's not something anybody's going to want to do. So
I actually think it would probably help. I just can't even get my mind wrapped around, going into ice water. So I need to focus on some other things that it's more something I could get my head wrapped around.
No different than for me going for a run or starting exercise or starting a business. That first step, the first one is always the hardest. It's like you're overcoming that initial obstacle or the block that's in your head that I think everything's kind of mental. I could do a whole podcast about this, if you can tell your mind that you want to do something and you're just going to follow through with it. So no matter what it is, we all kind of have those different things.
I applaud you for it. I actually do. I really, because it is like a mind over matter type thing. I really feel like when I watch some of the videos you posted, it genuinely is training your mind to say that I can do something that I didn't think that I could do. I could spend an additional 30 seconds in the water that I didn't think I could do. I mean, I totally get the concept. I mean, I just,
the going through it is definitely tough.
I'm looking for another avenue to explore that concept, that doesn't involve ice water.
Yeah. Well, we can get into this. One of the first questions that I wanted to pose to you, and I think it's something that a lot of people, whether you're kind of going through stuff and you come across something, but how do you develop a promotional marketing campaign for your business?
It's a great question. I think it's one of the perfect questions to start anything, with. And the thing I always ask anybody that I'm talking to about working with our agency or anything like that, number one thing I always ask them is, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, what you tell me what success looks like to you. Like, what are you trying to accomplish with a marketing campaign or with your marketing efforts? Because everything is going to flow back from that. I mean, if you tell me that, you know, you're a brand new business and you're just trying to get your name out there, and that's one thing. If you tell me you're an established business that sort of has been used to doing something and you sort of avoided the digital marketing thing and it's all been word of mouth, but now you realize that you need to get active in digital marketing, but you've been in business for 25 years, that's something different. So I always start any conversation with, tell me what you're trying to accomplish. And then the question of how to develop a promotional marketing campaign for your business all flows back from that. Once I understand what you're trying to accomplish, then that's going to tell me what elements of a promotional marketing campaign we would need to put together, because no two campaigns are exactly alike. I mean, it's not a cookie cutter type situation. You really want to understand the end goal and then work backwards from there. So what I would say to anybody about, and I might be taking the easy way out about this question because I'm not giving specifics, but I really can't give specifics until somebody tells me what exactly they're trying to accomplish. And that's the number one question you have to answer, because otherwise, how do you know if you're succeeding or not? If I asked you, if it was open-ended, it's like, well, how do I know my marketing efforts are succeeding or not? Until you tell me what target you're trying, you know, to hit, we aren't going to know whether we're hitting that target or not. It's just this open, like, we're just doing marketing. Well, if you don't tell me where we're trying to, you know, there's the old adage of getting on the bus and drive it. It's like, if you don't tell me where we're trying to drive the bus, how will we know whether we get there or not? We're just driving around town. We're not even going to any destination in specific, which doesn't mean that there can't be good things that happen along just doing random marketing things. But I really think it's imperative when somebody wants to do marketing to really sit down and say, what do I want? Where do I want to go with my marketing efforts? Number one. And number two, probably similar but slightly different question. What does success look like? If I were to tell you 6 months in the future, tell me what this campaign or these efforts we're doing, what does it look like if it's working for you? Like, is it a certain amount of leads? What does it look like? You define it. And then once you define that, we can work backwards from there to put together a campaign to reach that goal.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
we're looking for with that question, but I really don't know any way to answer the question unless we know what the end is, what the goal is.
No, I think that's absolutely true, especially having been on calls with you and having watched many of these past videos before I joined. That's kind of been one of the things that you've always mentioned, is that everybody is going to be different, whether it's, and especially too, if you're going into this new year and you've got the past 5 years, you've done maybe 10 or 12 different things, you can kind of pick and choose what's worked or what hasn't, what you've liked, and then you can kind of mold it. And it's no different, like we were talking before, of just starting something. If you're a new business or one that hasn't done marketing before in the past, you have to start somewhere. And chances are you might be completely wrong with whether it's who you're targeting, what your goals are. But the only way that you're going to know what works is by doing it, or kind of following through and trying to figure out, like, okay, and then you kind of get your own kind of congregated data of like, all right, this worked. We got, just talking to somebody this week, there's higher quality leads that we're getting at the moment, whether it's because they're more serious about whatever they're doing, and there's going to be tweaks along the way that get you to that point, that get you to somebody that's going to be much more serious. And so the only way that you can know how anything's going to work, because automatically out of the gates, you're not going to have a good idea of what's going to work. You might have other competitors or people that you've worked with in your field that kind of give you some feedback, but until you do it, there's no way that you're going to know what's going to work for your business, for the goals that you have, for within the budget that you're working with.
Well, and that's part of what, if you're doing it yourself, I 1,000% agree with you on what you're saying. If you're working with an agency, hopefully one of the things the agency brings to the table is, if you tell them your goals and where you're trying to go, hopefully they can utilize their expertise to help start narrowing the options down. Doesn't mean they're going to have an exact formula, But if you tell me you're trying to go to a certain spot, I have a pretty good idea of where we're going to at least start the process. And I've also ruled certain things out. It's not like everything is on the table. We rule, and hopefully the expertise of the agency you're working with is going to allow you, because if, and that's only a matter of just a library of experiences of doing different things to know what works and what doesn't for different things. I mean, otherwise you can actually spend a lot of money trying a lot of things that don't work. And, you're going to learn something, hopefully, if you're tracking it. But it could be an expensive education, to get there. So.
No, absolutely. Hello, Corey. Thanks for chiming in there. So our next question, kind of along those lines, say that was marketing. Whether you have a current website or you're starting to build one and you kind of want to figure out a way to kind of merge the two, how does Google Analytics integrate with your website?
I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe you could clarify. Are they asking like the technical aspect of how it integrates, or what place it has?
More of, I think, the benefits that you can get while coordinating Google Analytics. I know that we've kind of done that with some people where you can kind of see some of the data as far as how people are getting there, how data searching.
Sure.
Aside from, obviously, we could have Matt on and do the technical aspects of actually what's going on. But I think for the question for you specifically is, how can we benefit from having Google integrated into our website?
Got it. So, visibility of what's happening with your marketing efforts is the number one thing I would say. I mean, whenever you're spending money, you want to be able to track it, whether that's on the back end of Meta and you're tracking, your impression share, you're tracking your clicks, you're tracking your conversion rate, you're tracking all those different things, or on Google Analytics when you're tracking what's actually happening on your website. Because what Google Analytics allows you to do is track what's happening when people come to your website. What pages they're visiting, how long they stay, if they're leaving, if you're getting an unusual amount of bounces from a particular page, people are leaving from that particular page. It might be an indication that something's wrong with that page or the page isn't engaging. So visibility of what's happening is crucial because, again, when you're spending money, yes, you're spending money to try to get results, no question, but you're also spending money to collect data. Because that's going to allow you, if you spend $10 today and you collect data, it's going to allow you to spend the next $10 smarter, because you're learning from, we were just talking a minute ago about learning from, and as an agency or working with an agency, them having a dialogue or a library of expertise. Every dollar you spend should be buying you information, should be so that the next dollar you spend, you can spend wiser than you spent the last dollar. And that's a never-ending process. What doesn't matter whether you've been marketing for 10 years or 10 minutes, you will always continue to learn. And I am a big believer in being data-driven. It doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what I say, the data tells the story, and the data doesn't lie. If I tell you something's going to work, and the data shows that it's not working, it doesn't matter what I say. The data is proving me wrong. I mean, the data is not doing what I said it was going to do. So the reason to have Google Analytics integrated into your website or some sort of analytics software is so that you can understand what's happening when you run advertisement or even when you run organic posts and things like that. What's happening when you bring people to your website? And that could be an indication of whether your ads are your ads, like if somebody arrives at your website and they don't find what they expected to find, it could be that your ads led people down a certain road and then you didn't bring them to the place that they thought they were going to be. Could be that your website page is not engaging, which means they got there, you got them there, but then they bailed on you. So that data can really help you start to analyze what's happening, and hopefully it makes you smarter so that you could either make changes to your advertising, make changes to your website, or again, primarily just spend the next dollar smarter than you spent the one before it.
No, I think that nailed it on the head. I was going to kind of echo the thought of if you're bringing somebody to a page and you kind of, like you said, it's having that data to know what brought them there, how long they stayed. And especially too, it's if you're a tint shop or if you're car customs and you have PPF and you have vinyl and you have ceramic coatings and window tint, you can kind of see, like you said, what's working, what pages kind of have what's pulling people in, and then you can kind of mirror that across other pages and try to kind of, like you said, it's a constant battle of trying to make sure what's working and how are people getting there, how are they staying, like are they ending up becoming a lead or not. I think those are definitely the data points that you want to have by having some sort of an integration, or just plain and simple understanding the data that's given to you by whatever platform that you're using. And so and having time to read it and understand what's going on. So, or having somebody that can feed it back to you.
I think you have to always be looking at what you're doing. It doesn't matter, if you're running ads on Meta, if you're doing organic things, if you're spending money on SEO, if you're spending money on Google AdWords, you always have to be looking at it and saying, and it always is changing. I mean, things are always changing. You always have to be tweaking on what you're doing. And if you don't have the mechanism to understand what's happening today, you can't make those adjustments that you need to. So whether it's Google Analytics, whether it's Facebook Ads Manager or Meta Ads Manager, I guess you could call it, or Google AdWords and the back end of that and understanding what's going on back there, data is your friend. And if you aren't collecting data, or if you're not looking at the data, you're flying blind, and you might occasionally, the old saying, a blind squirrel gets a nut every once in a while. You may have some success, but you might be spending a lot more than you need to get that success because you're not utilizing the data at your disposal. Simple as that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's kind of one of those things too. We want to, by doing these, obviously, hopefully people kind of look into what they're doing a little bit more versus just kind of throwing money at the wall just because they have a set budget and I just want to put this money towards something and I'm not going to think about it. But yet it's like, hey, you might be using a fifth of that money to get the same amount of people coming into your shop or business. So it's just, if you can kind of take time and try to understand it, do your research, look up stuff on YouTube if you don't know something, because that's the way I learn. It's kind of, if I don't know something, I'm going to at least figure out at least a way to understand it a little bit better. And then I can use that information and move forward.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. The next question, still kind of sticking with websites, is what is involved when indexing or submitting my website to the search engines? Like, so this usually happens when we're talking about it with a new website. So what all is involved when somebody is submitting the website to be indexed or to, just kind of submitting it to be crawled is kind of what you always mention.
Okay. Couple different things I'll mention. When you take a website live on the internet, if you let a website be out there live on the internet, over time, Google will understand that a website's there and begin to understand what is on that website, what information is on that website. It'll begin to crawl additional pages and it'll begin to know what that website is. What submitting your website to search engines does is it fast tracks that process. You create something that's called a sitemap, and much like the name suggests, it's literally a map of your site. It's a system that basically tells where all the pages are, what information is on those pages, what you want to include in the map, what you don't want to include in the map, things like that. And I don't want to get overly technical here, but there may be pages on your website, like a thank you page when somebody submits a contact form, that you would create as a note, what's called a no index page. Like, you don't want Google to look at that page because it's really not relevant to the search results. So it would be like listed as a no index page. That being said, what you're doing when you submit your search engine, your website to the search engines, is you're submitting that sitemap and you're fast tracking the process. You're saying to Google, hey, I launched a new site, or I have a website. Here's all the information so that you can crawl it and understand what my website's about, so that you can begin populating it in relevant search results. It's not really any more technical than that. I mean, you're basically telling Google what your website is so that they can populate it in the proper search results. Submitting it just fast tracks the process. If you let it sit there for enough time, Google will figure out what it is. You're just fast tracking the results. It also makes sense to resubmit your sitemap or ask it to Google or other search engines to look at it again if you've made substantive changes. You've added some pages. You've substantively changed pages. You've updated the SEO. Anything that you do to your website that would be considered a substantive change, you want to ask Google to recrawl that website. I'm using Google synonymously with search engines because, let's face it, it's over 90% of all the search traffic in the world. But you want to tell the search engines, hey, take another look at my website because I've changed these pages. I've added new pages, whatever. So it's not a one-time thing. It's not, certainly when we build a website for a client, we submit their website to be crawled as part of that build process. But that doesn't mean that if 6 months later they add 2 pages of their website, they may need to resubmit so that Google knows, hey, we added 2 pages to this website. So that's essentially what it is. It's basically telling the search engines, here's what I have, here's what's on there, and it just allows them to really understand what your website is. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to match people that are searching with appropriate results. And this allows you to basically tell them, hey, here's what my website's about, so that they can figure out which things to match you with, essentially. I mean, that's what Google's trying to do. I mean, what you don't want to do, go ahead. I was just going to say, what you don't want to do is try what I would call game the system and create a bunch of nonsense to try to get Google to, put you up for things that aren't relevant. Because a lot of times if Google catches you trying to do stuff like that, they'll actually penalize your results, and you actually, won't even be coming up to where you should be because you tried to game the system. And the reason I say that, like, some people will create numerous pages that are essentially the same content in an effort to just sort of try to say there's all this content on my website, but a lot of it is just duplication, or a lot of it is not relevant. So just got to be careful about that.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention, I know one of the things that we always get asked is, how can I get to the top of page 1? And obviously, if this is something that hadn't been done with your website, say you started a Wix or a Squarespace website and you kind of didn't do any of this stuff, and you're wondering, well, how can I get better results, whether it's been a month or 2 after you've started. And I think, obviously, we use WordPress a lot, and I've used Squarespace in the past, and so you can kind of integrate a lot of your SEO stuff into that. And it's also, especially on WordPress, like, it kind of automatically asks to index each page if you want to. So then that way you're kind of, like you said before, alerting Google that this page or this website is it's here. And so, like you said, I think that's the kind of the key to, if you even want to start sniffing page 1, is making sure that, one, Google knows that your site or your pages even exist. And so then that way you can kind of get, like they said, you can connect the people that you want to connect with. And that's kind of key to the whole thing, is that you're trying to reach the people that you want to have come in as a serious lead or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And again, I mean, the thing you have to keep in mind with regard to coming up on page 1, there's a lot of moving variables to that. I mean, you could have your website done, proper SEO done, everything is perfect, it's been submitted to Google. That doesn't mean you're going to immediately go straight to number 1. The one thing is, it's a dynamic environment. All the other websites that are coming up also potentially are building new websites, making changes to their website, trying to do things to get their website to come up to number 1. So even if you are successful getting to number 1 today, make no mistake about it, there's other people that are trying to unseat you from that and knock you down. So it's, again, back to what we were talking about earlier, it's never a set it and forget it type thing. If you're fortunate to be in the number 1 position, you should be doing things to make sure you stay in the number 1 position, or try to stay in the number 1 position. Because if you stay stagnant with what you've got, as time goes by, people are going to add new content and probably unseat you. And next thing you know, you're going to be 2, 4, 6, whatever it is, as you move down the page. But I'll leave you with this. Anybody that's listening to this, I hope this is the one nugget they can take away from this. Any reputable agency is not going to promise you a certain time frame to which you're going to be number one on Google, because there's simply no way you could take into account every element that would be involved in making sure you're number one. But let's say you do everything right, but also your three best competitors also do everything right, and they were ahead of you to begin with. You're not going to leapfrog them if they're also doing everything right. So it should be a red flag to you. Any agency that promises you, hey, in 3 months we'll have you number one on a particular page, I would, in my opinion, that should be a red flag, because I don't know any reputable agency that's going to promise that. Now, is it realistic that you should be able to say, hey, within a very short time period, everything that's supposed to be done to put me in the best position for that to happen is going to be done? Absolutely. But you can't promise results because it's a dynamic environment. It's not these things aren't happening in a static environment to where you can know that if I make this move and this move and this move, we're going to move up the chain. Well, what if the other 5 people are making this move and this move and this move also? How does that all play out? So,
yep, no, exactly. And so I got one more kind of website related one, and this is one that I was looking through the website and I didn't know what this was. So I wanted to ask you, since we've never talked about it and hopefully you probably know about it. So it's within the aspects of hosting my website, what is cPanel access?
Okay. I understand this moderately well, but I'm certainly not the person that would be like Matthew would probably be the guy that would be best to ask this question because he really understands it. But the cPanel access into your hosting environment is essentially being able to get into all the core files of your website and things like that that are on the server that's hosting your website. So cPanel access would allow you to go in and download the website files if you wanted to, change the website files, things like that if you wanted to. Where it's relevant, if you were switching from one hosting company to the next, a company would need cPanel access to go in and download your website files, load them back up on another server, and then repoint your domain at the new server. So it's essentially referring to access to your server environment to access the main files of your website, if you will. So it's not something you want a lot of people to have. I mean, your the person that's your webmaster and maybe, a variety of technical people that you might have working for you, but it's not something that you just want to have out there to where everybody that works for your company has cPanel access. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you can crash your entire website pretty easily.
No, that makes sense. And that kind of, as I was reading it, that kind of correlates to what else was being said. So I personally thank you for answering my marketing question.
Well, hey, and again, here's the thing to keep in mind real quick on that. Make sure that you understand who's hosting your website and that you understand that you own your website, because there are situations we run into all the time where somebody decides they want to move on and a company's almost holding their website hostage. And, just make sure, whether it's your domain names, whether it's your hosting environment, whatever it is, that it's in your name and that you own the access, or you're working with a company that will provide that access. If we have clients that decide they don't want to host with our company, we have no problem giving them those files, giving them access so they can get the files so they can move on if that's what they decide to do. But I can tell you from being on the other side of it, not all companies feel that same way, and some of them can really make it difficult for you to switch. So just make sure you're not in a situation where you find out too late that, hey, that company procured your domain name for you under their account, and technically you don't even own your domain name, and they don't want to give it to you now because you're moving your service somewhere else. So just make sure you have those discussions with who you're working with to make sure that you can get access to your domain name, your hosting account, everything like that. Doesn't mean you have to have access to it and go in there all the time, but just make sure you're not going to find out after the fact that you really don't own your website, don't own your domain name, things of that nature.
No, that's good to know. And so we're up at the half hour mark, but I've got the one last thing with our marketing terms to know. So the one I have today is, what is impression share? Now, I don't know if you
Okay.
want me to give you the definition, or do you want to kind of jump at it and then I'll come at what the AI kind of gave me.
I mean, I can take a stab at it. We'll see if it actually matches up. So where impression share comes up a lot is when you're talking about like Google AdWords. So Google, say for a certain search term, we work with a lot of people that are the window tinting industry. So say window tinting, just generally that term. What Google is going to tell you is what the total possible impressions were for that term. How many people searched in the area you're marketing in? How many people searched for window tinting? Let's just use round numbers to make this easy for me on the math side. Let's say in a 30-day period, 10,000 people searched for window tinting. So that's the total potential impressions, 10,000, because there's only 10,000 people that search for that term. So that's the max, that's the possible. And let's say that of that, based on how much money you're spending, what type of ads you had, what other people are spending, a variety of different things, that you had a 3,500 and you made 3,500 impressions out of 10,000. That would mean your impression share was 35%. Out of the possible impressions, you out of 10,000 possible impressions, you showed up 3,500 times. So your percent impression share is 35% of the total. Obviously, the higher your impression share, the better it is. That means, but you might get to a situation where, and this is really going off on a tangent, but there's a law in economics called the law of diminishing returns, to where you could spend a certain amount of money to get to a certain impression share, but then have to spend 3 times. Let's say, to just make this, let's say it costs you $1,000 to get to a 60% impression share. It may cost you $2,000 additional to get to an 80% impression share. So you get to a point where it doesn't become cost effective to try to keep driving your impression share higher, because you may be going up against elements of somebody else that's spending money that's going to really prohibit that, to where you may have to spend a lot more money so the early impression share might be easier to come by than the later impression share or the higher impression share. But that's my definition. Hopefully that aligned with AI.
I'm impressed. You pretty much nailed it. Like so it has it defined as, this is a metric used in digital marketing that shows the percentage of impressions or views your ad has received compared to the total number of impressions it could have gotten. It's a good way to understand how much more you could potentially increase your advertising reach. So I think you kind of broke it down exactly the way that this defined it, which to me makes a lot of sense. And obviously it goes, like you said, with Google AdWords, to try to figure out how do you pick the right terms and the keywords and the negative keywords to make sure that you do kind of get into that range where people are finding you specifically within the reach of everybody kind of searching for a particular topic.
And just also be aware that, it doesn't mean that you're the company or the person that works for you or the agency you're working with, just because your impression share is not 100%, that they're doing something wrong. I mean, the idea is hopefully that you're increasing your market share, but again, very rarely, if ever, are you going to attain perfect 100% impression share. But ideally, the goal is to be increasing your percentage of your impression share. But again, I think you'll find out as you'll get to a certain point, and then it'll start to get more and more costly to continue to get more and more. And you just have to figure out where that balance point is for your company. But again, that's, again, you can't, you just sort of have to, again, we were talking at the very start of this about the value of data. If you're running Google AdWords, your agency should be able to tell you what your impression share is of the total. that's data that they can collect from the back end of AdWords to give you an idea. So if you decide, hey, you know, I'm thinking about upping my budget, you know, you should be able to look at different things. Like, one, are you currently running out of budget? Is that, you know, are you running out of budget somewhere during the day? What's your current impression share? Is there room for you to improve? You might spend a whole lot more money and only get a couple more points of impression share, and it might not be worth the money you're going to spend to get the couple extra points of impression share. So again, it's all data. It's all understanding what the data means and how that, so that you can spend, you know, I'm going to keep going back to the analogy. I don't know why it came up to me earlier. I've never used this analogy before, but that you spend your next dollar smarter than you spent your last dollar.
No, that's what it's about. Great advice. Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody's kind of wanting to find that in a way that's, how can I make sure that I didn't waste that I use the money that I spent and I don't waste the future money that I might have putting towards something. So I think that's great advice.
I mean, it's just like, you know, there's an old adage that has nothing to do with marketing that, you know, talks about you either succeed or you learn. There's no failure.
Yep.
You either succeed or you learn. And same thing could be applied to marketing. You either get the results that you want out of your marketing campaign, or hopefully you learn so that your next marketing campaign is better than your last one. There's no failures. Succeed or learn. Those are the two options. But if you're not paying attention to your data or things like that, you very well could fail because you have no idea what's happening with your campaigns.
No, I think that's a great adage for any business owner. Like, you got to take every day by either learning or succeeding. It's just kind of how you grow in general, or as you grow as a person. I think each day is, whether you stumble across something, things that might not work the way that you wanted to, but then, like you said, learn from it. It's kind of what we talked about at the beginning too. It's the mindset of knowing I'm not a failure. I got to figure out that this just didn't work and learn from it. So I think that's a great thing to kind of take away from this.
Unless you're a Cleveland Browns fan, then we historically, over the years of my entire life, seemingly we can't seem to either win or learn.
I'm right here. I'm a Vikings fan, so I totally understand it as well. It's that we enjoy the misery, I think, is the other part of that as well.
Yep. So, I mean, but, you know, again, I mean, I think that this is a great time, just to bring everything full circle. This is a great time of the year to start looking at those things, start analyzing those things, start asking the right questions, because, you know, this is a time of the year where a lot of people's businesses might be a little bit slower, or they have a little bit more time to think about their businesses. If nothing else, you know, between Christmas and New Year's, a lot of times that's a very soft period of time for a lot of businesses. So it gives you a full week to really, you know, saturate your mind with, hey, how do you want to go into 2024? Ask the right questions, look at the right data. So it's a great time of the year, as I mentioned earlier, to really start looking at your business, looking at what you've done right over the past year, what you've done wrong over the past year, and what you want to do different moving forward. So a lot of these questions sort of play, and I mean, not that we planned it that way, obviously, but a lot of these questions really play right into that. I mean,
yeah, so. No, I think we want everybody to kind of noodle things around, especially this time of year, and kind of, it's whether it's a calendar date, we all kind of have to figure out a way to, how do we make things better and kind of grow from there. So I think it's like I said, and I'm glad that you got fired up about this, is that I made me excited to know that this is definitely like a time of year to kind of start thinking about a lot of different things, and you will have some downtime to kind of do research, and make sure to go check out all of our YouTube videos for different aspects of different things that you might not have known. And so I think you will have that time to kind of research and do different things about things that you don't know. And that's what we want everybody to do.
Yeah. And I think that we're not just saying this on our end, like, it's like, hey, we're dispensing advice. We just had our weekly staff meeting earlier today, and we're even talking about this process as it relates to eye magnet management. So we're not just saying, hey, this is what you need to do. This is what we're doing. I mean, this is actually, what we're thinking about, what we're doing. And again, there's no such thing as status quo in life, in business. You can't stay in the same place. You're either moving forward or you're falling behind, whether you realize it or whether it's happening so slowly that you don't realize it till maybe later in the process. But there's no such thing as getting to a certain point and putting it in neutral and staying status quo. You either are pushing forward or you're falling back. And this is a really good time of the year to really start thinking about those things, because we work with a lot of businesses, unfortunately, that have had a lot of success over a lot of years, and then all of a sudden they get to a point where their business isn't what they want it to be, but they've really ignored it for 2 or 3 years, and it didn't happen overnight. Where they're at now has happened slowly over the course of 2 or 3 years of them not paying attention to the things that they did to become successful, and now they're really starting to notice it. But it didn't just happen. It's happened over the course of 2 or 3 years of starting to fall slowly backwards. So, part of the things I think about when at this time of the year is, are we getting complacent? Are we beginning to get too comfortable with a place? Are we not spending as much time trying to educate ourselves because we feel like we've already got it figured out, so we don't have to be as hungry for that information? If you're in a business and you have a level of expertise, are you continuing to fine tune your craft so you can continue to get better? Or are you relying on the fact that, okay, I've been at a certain level and that I'll always continue to be at that level? Sorry, man, I'm kind of, it's a Monday. I just had a cup of coffee as we were talking, kind of excited, but it's like, this stuff gets me fired up, because this is why we're in business. This is why we're doing what we're doing. We're not doing this to sort of mail it in. I mean, you're either in it to win it, or like, even with my son, that when he plays football, I say to him, I'm like, I'll never be disappointed in you if your team loses the game, but I will be disappointed in you if you don't give it 100%. I mean, if you're not giving 100%, what are you doing? I mean, find something else that you're passionate about that you can give it 100%. Because if you're not giving 100%, what are you doing? I mean, what are you doing?
No, I completely agree. And you're getting hearts and likes over here too. So definitely you're hitting the chord with people. I think that's, to me, it's always been, it's not the destination, it's the journey has kind of been one of my things too. It's like, if you can't enjoy what you're doing and you're only focused on that far goal, then you're going to miss out on all these other things that are along the way. And I think that at least has been an adage for me. I have to enjoy the process. It might be, like you said, it might not be the best day, but you're learning and you're doing something different and you're evolving. You're jumping in the cold water. You have to figure out different things to kind of keep yourself going, and rather than just, I'm going to stick with the same routine every day and kind of just, you're going to get bored with life. You're going to get bored with whatever you're doing. You have to kind of evolve and change. And that's the only way, one, you're going to keep up or keep yourself excited and want to do different things. Because again, this is one of those that could go on forever, but if you're not giving yourself something to do each day, you're just kind of, in my head, you're kind of slowly dying. So I want to always have a new thing or trying different aspects of life and trying to create that continued journey. That's hopefully there isn't a destination. I'm just constantly moving down the road and enjoying everything that I'm seeing and doing along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, like you said, we're at 45 minutes, so we can wrap it up. But if you guys have any questions, if there's anything we talked about today that spurred any additional conversation you want to have, whatever, put it in the comments. Reach out to either I or Ronnie directly. We'd be happy to talk about it. And again, I wasn't saying this today to preach at any of you guys that are watching this. I'm saying it as much to preach to myself while I'm talking about it, because it's just as easy for me to get complacent about the things I'm doing. It's just as easy for me to come into work and not really get after it. So I'm saying it as much for myself, and it's the same thing that gets Ronnie out of bed in the morning to go get in the ice bath. It's like, you got to have something that pushes you. You got to have something, whether it's that ice bath in the morning or whether it's trying to spend 15 minutes to learn something new today that you didn't know yesterday. But it's like, don't mail it in. That's my advice. Don't mail it in. I mean, it's too easy to get complacent, and again, I'm not preaching to any of you guys. I'm preaching as much to myself as anybody right now.
No, completely agree. I think it's just one of those things where I'll close it with this. The only reason I mentioned this to you before we came on air, the reason I do an ice bath, it's if that's the hardest thing that I have to do today, what's stopping me from doing anything else? So I think it's, like I said, and we can wrap it it's a mindset game. Constantly keep yourself creative, pushed, educate yourself, and it's the only way to live.
Yep. All right. We'll see you guys later.
See you next
tuning in. All right. Take care.